Pit Talk, brought to you by Shannon's.
Cars are our passion. Building, restoring, or modifying. It's about making it our own. It's an obsession. Shannon's know what it's worth. That's why the agreed value includes all your modifications. Get a quote online today.
This is the moment then that we've all been waiting for.
4 in a row, Max.
Here comes Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris.
They are playing hardball out there at the moment.
The pivotal moment of 2024.
Hello and welcome to Pit Talk, brought to you by Shannon's. On today's episode, in the mid-season break, we're ranking our top performers of the first part of the Formula 1 season from 1 to 10 with F1 commentator Alex Jacques, and we're going to run through the latest in Supercars and MotoGP. My name's Michael Laminato. It's great. It's a pleasure to have your company and the company of my co-host. Ask him about his contact management habits. They're very exciting. It's Matt Clayton.
That is another separate podcast, one we will not go into here, but perhaps off air and people can leave their thoughts.
Yes.
But you know what is very strange? It's after a weekend where there's been no Formula 1 and no MotoGP. This is possibly the most awake you and I have ever been for this podcast.
It is remarkable, isn't it? Only daytime racing. Can you imagine it?
Incredible. It's like we're in Europe. Put your Sunday roast on.
Yes. The only thing missing was the Sunday roast in this case. Just Supercars at the weekend with F1 and MotoGP in their mid-season breaks. And MotoGP resuming shortly. We'll talk about that. But let's start, before we get to our interview and our rankings, which will take up the bulk of this podcast, with interested versus expert.
Oh, straight off the top.
Yes, the eternal subject.
Can I go first?
Please.
All right, so Supercars. Brock Feeney wins the Sprint Cup on the weekend. We're back at Queensland Raceway, first time in a long time. Lots of people at Queensland Raceway, which was good to see. How did he do it? Because we know that he won 2 of the 3 races over the weekend, but this is significant. This is the first time we've seen this format. And it was pretty emphatic, wasn't it, really?
Yes, a lot of damp people at Queensland.
It sure was.
This was emphatic. We knew it was coming, really, because he already had massed such a big points lead. But this was the point of the finals, is that by now, if you're talking about him already winning the championship, it's only the Sprint Cup. He won it on that first race. Some will say provisionally, but that's when the points were counted up. He won it then. And that's important for a couple of reasons before we talk about the weekend, and that is the automatic qualification of the finals, which he already had anyway. He can't move out of the top 10 even if he didn't turn up to the Enduros, so that's good for him. But it's the 25 bonus points that are important. So now, this weekend, obviously, having just the end of the Sprint Cup, but also the end of the Bathurst 1000, the Enduro Cups, and we're going to talk about these bonus points that are applicable for the first weekend of the finals. So that means if disaster were to befall him in that first weekend, well, he'll have at least 25 bonus points in his pocket. If he wins the Enduro Cup, and a reminder, the Enduro Cup points, they're not carried from the Sprint Cup. We're going to talk about a lot of different point systems now, a very Supercars subject. They kind of reset to 0, not the overall points. Anyway, someone will get another 25 at the end, and that's going to be important in a couple of months when we start talking about the finals. But he had a almost completely straightforward weekend, would have clean swept it, except for a penalty picked up for jumping the start. Now, I've seen the replays. It's there, but it's there, but it's not. Extraordinarily fractional. I understand why he felt a bit hard done by, because he also had great starts every race, like really powerful starts. So unfortunately got pinged there, tried to challenge his teammate Will Brown for the win in the second race, the Saturday afternoon race, Saturday evening race. Couldn't get it done. Will Brown did get his first win since Melbourne, which is remarkable. Did drop to 3rd in the championship standings anyway because he got a penalty for Sunday for a pit lane infringement. But that kind of doesn't matter again, except for those bonus points pictures. But he could get those 25 in the Enduros. That's going to be his target now, obviously. But that's going to be its own chapter. But the Sprint Cup, the first ever, has been won. He got the trophy. Did Brock Feeney at the very end of the weekend. So he's got a lot of trophies this year, a lot of trophies so far. Still pursuing, obviously, the biggest one at the end of the year. But at the conclusion, the natural conclusion of this part of the season, this is Brock Feeney's year. There's a little bit of an irony, isn't there? I was thinking about this before we move on briefly, that he's been building up in all these years in Supercars. If this year had come last year, what a different story last season would have been. It's ironic that he's hit this incredible run of form in the year where it kind of doesn't count for that much until we get to the end of the year. Just briefly before we move on as well, I do want to talk about the finals picture because that has changed a little bit. Not a lot in it at the very bottom. I'm reading my notes here. Yes, I reckon there's only 2... look, a lot can happen in the Enduros because it's 300 points per race. It's one race situation. You've got co-drivers. Everything's a bit wackier. But for me, it's Kai Allen, who's 20 points out of the 10, and Cameron Hill, who's summed to 108 points. And he was in the 10 not that long ago as well. Thomas Randall's the driver on the bubble. He had a bit of an ordinary weekend or a bit of a quiet weekend. And then above him, Ryan Wood, who really doesn't deserve to be so close to the 10, but's had a bit of bad race luck, and Andre Heimgartner, who's 21 points out. So that's the interesting equation for me. I think for me, it's those two drivers out of the 10. Don't know who's in the 10, but those bottom two, obviously, the most logically at risk.
Yes.
Or bottom three, I should say, with Thomas Randall. It's an interesting setup because, like I say, Enduros can be a little bit random. That's the state of play at Supercars. MotoGP back this weekend.
Yes.
I am interested. I'm also particularly interested in Jack Miller, contract news about which we have not yet heard.
Yeah, and I thought this would have happened either just before or during the mid-season break. I mean, technically, we're still in the mid-season break for a couple of days, but going back to the Italian Grand Prix, the Yamaha MD, Paolo Pavesio, said that they would make a decision on Jack Miller or Miguel Oliveira at Pramac. Hasn't happened. And I suspect what's going on here, now we know that Jack went off and did the Suzuka 8 Hour, finished second in that. To go and give up a fair chunk of your mid-season break to do that event for Yamaha in Japan is a very big thing. That would have gone down very well with the Yamaha up highs. But I suspect the bigger tale here is that it's the factory Yamaha seat that Jack may actually end up in, because Alex Rins is in a second 2.5 years now of massive underperformance, and it's a little tough on Alex because he's not been the same rider since he broke his leg back at Mugello. It's 2023. You know, he's finished once inside the top 10 since then.
Really?
It's been that grim.
Wow.
And he is on this 2-year contract. He's a fantastic rider.
Yeah.
We know that, but he's not been the same rider since then. Jack is the second highest placed Yamaha rider in the standings. He's the only one of their 4 riders that doesn't have a contract for next year. We know that Toprak Razgatlioglu is coming in definitely at Pramac. What I suspect they might do here is I think Jack might end up as Fabio Quartararo's teammate.
Remarkable.
At the factory Yamaha team for a guy that was the last rider signed for this year. I suspect that Pramac might go all rookie next year, bring Diogo Moreira up from Moto2, partner him with Razgatlioglu. It almost becomes a B team, a Yamaha B team if you like. Jack's not going to be around in MotoGP for a long time, let's be honest. You know, the clock is at, 10 minutes to 12 at this point, maybe 8 minutes to 12. But I suspect he could really help that Yamaha factory outfit. And if he's producing more this early in his Yamaha tenure than Alex Rins has for basically 2.5 seasons, it's harsh and it's not Alex Rins' fault. But I suspect that Jack Miller might be getting some better news than perhaps we thought, and maybe even as early as this weekend.
Yeah, wow. And what happens to Alex Rins in this? I have a lot of questions now. What happens
You
to
do.
Alex Rins in this situation?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. There's not a lot of vacancies elsewhere. I wonder if Alex's destiny now is to perhaps become a third rider and or test rider. He's still too good and his high points to just be completely parked, and he's still young enough to be on the grid, I would say, but where are the openings? And teams are now, you look at the success of Pedro Acosta and Fermin Aldeguer's come in this year. Teams are skewing younger now to find that fast young guy out of Moto2 who's not, his story hasn't been written yet. You fear the Rins story may have been written, and again, not his fault, but it's just a confluence of circumstances that he finds himself where he does.
Yeah, and I've just checked my notes. A Grand Prix weekend, which means Marquez is going to win, is that right?
Whoa, we might come back to that a little bit later on.
Okay.
A little bit later.
Good. Before we get to Alex Jacques, we've got to go to Move of the Week, brought to you by Shannon's. Now, there was one race this weekend, but I know, knowing you, may not be about the race.
No, my moves of the week have been going sort of 15 degrees or further left of centre the longer this podcast has gone. So I'm going to go move of the week is Ducati, who are winning basically every MotoGP race and winning the World Championship this year. They sent all of their riders and their test rider Michele Pirro to Balaton Park in Hungary last week with 7 Panigale superbikes. So their riders could get laps in around a brand new circuit that MotoGP is visiting at the end of this month. The rules stipulate that you cannot test, a GP rider cannot test any bike at a Grand Prix circuit within 15 days of the event starting. So they went there 17 days before the event started. They shipped 7 brand new Panigales out there. All the riders went in on their mid-season break and thrashed around Balaton Park for a day. Now, and it's obviously a superbike, it's not a MotoGP bike. No one's been to this place before, but all the Ducati guys have. And if you want, this is why they are winning world championships, because there's no stone left unturned with these guys. We know how dominant they are, we know how good their bike is. Let's give the riders some reps around this track that no one's been to yet. And so for me, Ducati move of the week by being ruthless in their domination of MotoGP and not letting the foot off.
I like it a lot. I do like it a lot. A great left field pick. I'm going to go with a regular old pick for move of the week.
Oh, like an actual overtake.
Yeah, an actual overtake. Double overtake, in fact. It wasn't heaps of overtaking at Queensland Raceway. But there was a little bit in that first race, and it was Kai Allen and Ryan Wood passing Will Brown for second and third early on in the race. Will Brown stake out of the was in a little bit damp, obviously out of the final corner. Both got him down into the first turn. It was a fine move. Okay, it was capitalising on a mistake. The move was fine, but what it meant was that we got the youngest ever podium in Australian Touring Car Championship history. 22-year-old was Brock Feeney. Kai Allen's 20 years old. I've written this down. Obviously, I could never remember this. Ryan Wood is 21 years old. So the average age is 20 years and 216 days.
God.
Which broke a record set only in Darwin, which was that, 2 months ago? So it just gets younger and younger.
I'm almost older than all those three guys put together. That's absolutely terrifying.
Great stat. Like, you can do your own calculations at home. But let's move on now, of course, to the main event of this podcast, ranking our top 10 drivers of the Formula One season so far. And if you're looking to assemble a list of the top 10 performers of this season so far, who better to rely on than the voice of Formula One, quite literally, Alex Jacques. He's the lead commentator of the F1 World Feed on F1 TV. You can also hear him on Channel 4 in the UK. And if you're a Foxtel Sports subscriber and you have a set-top box, you can hear him as well with your F1 TV Pro subscription, which you have if you download the app. If you don't have that, though, you can hear him right now. It's Alex Jacques joining us to rank the top 10 performers of the season so far. Alex, it's great to see you.
Right now, I love it. It's great to be with you. How are you, sir?
Doing very well. The mid-season, never quite in the middle of the year, which frustrates me, but we've had a great 14 rounds so far. I guess I want to start, before we get into how we're going to be ranking this top 10, you obviously have a very particular viewpoint of the season as the lead commentator. How's the season been in your eyes? Has it gone the way you've expected it to go?
Not at the start, no. Not at all. I thought we were going to have a pickup from last year where you were going to get to some circuits, Ferrari were going to be quicker, some circuits, Max Verstappen was going to do his thing, some circuits, McLaren were going to run away. Obviously, we've ended up with the McLaren show, and it's been interesting to go into a two-horse race. But no, I expected a wide open championship, and to not know, I expected multiple drivers in the mix. And in the end, we've got two contenders for the title. So something completely different has turned up.
And one of the cool things, I'm guessing from your perspective too, Alex, you've got two drivers in the mix for the title, but two of them haven't done it before. There's this newness to the title fight that we can predict how it might pan out, but the fact that neither of them has really been in this position before, we are going to have a first-time world champion, but how we get to that, I guess, is one of the real sources of intrigue between now and Abu Dhabi, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a really nice thing to have, because you could argue that I think you've got to go back realistically all the way to 2009 for it to be a two-horse race in a similar fashion. It's a great phenomenon in that it's a rare thing in Formula One. I think they're also both acutely aware that chances like this, where you've got to beat the other side of the garage where you've got full visibility of what they're doing, they don't come around very often. So it's given it a heightened intensity that only an inter-team battle can bring.
And it will be fascinating to see how that resolves itself. If you're McLaren, you're adamant that it won't need to resolve itself, but we'll wait and see in 10 races' time. Someone needs to win at a minimum. Now, we're here to assemble our top 10 performers of this first part of the season. You at home undoubtedly will have your own in your mind, top 10 performers. So it's harder to write down a list than you'd think. I encourage you to try it, and why not tell us on social media as well. But I'm sure also the three of us may have some differences in the top 10, or at least I hope we have some. Otherwise, this segment's going to go very straightforwardly. The rules are going to be like this. It's high school rules, really. The last time I was good at any sports, but we'll take it on turns to choose our team, because there are three of us, and 3 into 10 doesn't quite go. That means someone's going to get an extra pick. And what kind of host would we be, Alex, if you did not get that extra pick? So why don't you kick us off with your number one performer of the first part of the season?
Yeah, Oscar Piastri. Very close between him and Max Verstappen, but I think if you'd done a straw poll of the paddock at the start of the year, who they thought the contenders were going to be, if you'd asked for a lead McLaren contender, remember, we came into this year expecting it to be a multi-team, multi-driver battle. I think most would have said Lando Norris. So for him to step forward, have the most wins of the season so far, I mean, he's got 6. He could have way more. That I think is the frightening thing for everyone else so far this season. He has stepped up way beyond a second to third year expectation, and for me, he's the standout performer of the season, and yeah, he deserves his championship lead. So he's my number one.
Where did you have him, Michael? Just out of curiosity, because I think we should probably do that as we go through these picks before I go off, or you go off and pick number 2. But I'm assuming you also had Piastri in P1, yes?
I did. And I'd encourage anyone who wants to retain the suspense not to check the Fox Sports website where my list was published last week. So you can not do that, keep your suspense. But yes, he was my number 1 as well.
Yeah, he was my number 1 as well. And I think you can dive into a million stats. The one that I keep coming back to is, well, let's see how good your memory is, either of you. When was the last time Oscar Piastri didn't finish a Grand Prix?
Oh, good question.
It's a long time ago.
It wouldn't have been last year, would it?
He did all last year.
It was not. It was not. It was the United States Grand Prix of 2023.
Wow, very good.
So now we're looking at, so it's a 42 race finishing streak. So Hamilton has the record at 48, Verstappen 43. So Piastri is currently on the 3rd longest finishing streak in Formula One history. And I think that speaks to a little what you were saying before, Alex, in that we have to remember sometimes he won a Grand Prix for the first time basically 1 calendar year ago. It does not feel like that. It feels like he's been winning Grand Prix for a lot longer than that.
Yeah, agreed. I think that it's a very good point. It was Budapest last year. That came in strange circumstances. He's just improved in so many facets of his driving. Like year 1, he had the speed. He was able to get front rows. He was able to win sprint races. The next year, he was able to improve his tyre management throughout. That was the early task set by McLaren. And then to come into this year and look pretty complete from the word go. I mean, you look back in retrospect, and I maybe thought at the start of the year, wow, this is some performance at his home race from Oscar. Like, he's really started the season strongly. That level has not let off. That level of, I'm not going to wait my turn. It's cool that you're telling us to hold positions, but I won't be holding positions. He dealt with that so early on. Had the discussion with the team afterwards about them implementing that order. And I always think if you go back to your team, you have to back that up with a result immediately. He did that with just a superb performance in China. And since then, that's to define the dynamic. It's 50-50. It's both sides of the garage.
Alex, I want to, and you forgive us for indulging a little bit on our number 1 pick. We only have so many minutes per pick in the time allocated, but he is the Australian contender, obviously. But I'm interested in your perspective as well.
I know what podcast I'm on here, guys. I know what podcast I'm on.
Very good, yeah. I'm sure the accents would have given it away. The question I've been asked a lot as the realisation has dawned that we may be on track for our first world champion in a very long time is who saw this coming? We've talked a lot about the improvements he's made over these 3 seasons and that trajectory that he's had, and perhaps slightly bigger step this year than some might have expected. But you've also had the perspective through your commentary duties through Formula 3 and Formula 2 in past years when he was competing and winning in those series. Was it clear to you at that time that this was the trajectory he was on?
Yeah, in all honesty, his if you think of different attributes of a driver, his score is so high in so many different categories. Let's take car control in the last couple of races. So in Austria, would have been very, very easy to have an accident. Didn't have an accident. In Budapest, would have been very, very easy for that lockup to turn into contact with a teammate and gift the win to George Russell. I've covered him with live commentary since 2020. I can't remember him hitting many drivers in the entire time that I've covered his career. And if you consider that's from Formula 3 onwards, where that's basically part of the show, is that you watch raw, talented drivers occasionally have a bit of a nightmare. No, his car control in close combat is ridiculous. And then we've been talking about the journey he's been on. I think the expectation across the board was that the 4th season, a version of this Oscar Piastri would turn up. For him to be doing it in season 3 is just above and beyond all expectations. So to answer your question, I thought he'd get to this standard. I did not think he'd get to this standard this quickly.
Yeah, it also makes you wonder what might still be to come, regardless of how this season pans out. But let's move on from Oscar Piastri, if I'm allowed to say that, on the Australian Fox Sports podcast. Matt, you are not a guest, but I guess I've taken the hosting role here, so I suppose I must give you pick number 2.
Before we get into pick number 2, Michael, can I just explain a little bit of the rationale here behind this list that I've beautifully created in about 87 words? I actually came up with 6 different tiers. My first 1 to 4 were pretty obvious. Tier 5 was a driver all by themselves. 6 to 9 were in their own tier. 10 was in his own tier. There was a tier called 11 to 22, and then there was a last tier called Lance Stroll.
So that's where I was the 23rd ranked driver.
It's only because I couldn't. It's only because I couldn't rank him 24th, Michael. But now that you've been so kind to give me the number 2 pick in this draft, and Alex mentioned that it's an either-or question, I think it has to be Max Verstappen. We know that he's 3rd in the World Championship, but you look at what he did early in the season, I think it's actually looking better the further we get away from the beginning of the season with those 2 early wins. But the stat for me, 94.9% of his team's points. And the thing I keep thinking with Max Verstappen is it's not so much what he's doing. Let's put another driver in that car this year. Let's just say, for the sake of this exercise, that Max Verstappen doesn't exist and you've got random other driver next to first Liam Lawson and then Yuki Tsunoda. Where's Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship? They're probably ahead of Alpine. Are they ahead of anyone else? I'm really not sure. And so you look at what Verstappen's done in what he has had to drive. At the beginning of the year, it was probably a better car relative to the rest that it is now. That, to me, is a reason he has to be number 2 on this list, because I don't think his level has dropped at all. It's testament to how good his level is that he's managed to drag the performances out of this car that he has.
Yeah, I mean, number 2, I mean, you've sort of already hinted or suggested that number 2 was also Max Verstappen, Alex. But for me, I've dissented from this. Max Verstappen was the 3rd pick for me. Oh, so boy. I'm interested. I don't know. I guess I'll give away my pick number 2, but it kind of gives away who I'm going to pick for number 3. But I had George Russell as the 2nd best performer. But Alex, what your take on Max Verstappen's season in the first year we've seen in a long time, which he does not have the kind of car that can take him to a driver's championship?
Yeah, and I think he realistically knew that. So that's the first point to start with. He would have known very, very early on that he was fighting in the same way he was at the back end of last season. And he knows in his heart of hearts that, okay, the McLaren drivers might split their points like 1986 style, 2007 style, but he knows that he's on an unlikely tilt. So to produce the pole lap that he did in Suzuka, to hold both, they had both McLarens in his wheel tracks off in Suzuka, that epic start to the race in Imola as well. The fact he took pole position in Miami. I mean, at this stage of the season, when it's 0-sum between the 2 McLarens, he was stealing pole positions and Grand Prix victories in the way that only an all-time great can. It's as simple as that. You just got it with Senna and Schumacher. We saw it with Hamilton, especially in his early McLaren days where he was just able to win races that others were not. You're seeing it again here. Max Verstappen could easily have gone winless, poleless for the entire season. The fact he won't do that, keeps that run going of winning in every season since 2016, just masterful. There are some races where he was ahead of the McLarens that he just should not have been. And that type of performance, those are the drives that you remember. And the fact he was committed enough to still be in the mix, to still doing that. He's fighting a losing battle and he knows it. And he still picked off a couple of wins between now and the end of the year. So that's why he's my number 2. Because he easily could have had, if you look at the points in the other car, as was referenced, he easily could have just found himself going, I've won 4 in a row. I'm exhausted. Like, it can take a nice, easy season. Do you remember Vettel's season after 4 in a row? It could have been very similar to that. Not bad, but not winning races. Danny Rick, who did all the winning in 2014. So that's why he's my number 2.
Yeah, I like that Vettel analogy, actually. It's one I hadn't considered, that obviously different circumstances, different teammates, very much so. But there is an element of, you could easily have put in quite an average season so far and got away with it, really. Probably got away with it even more than Vettel did, but has not committed to that.
So judging by that, Michael, it sounds like Verstappen is your number 3. But so given that you do have the number 3 pick, perhaps you should mention the name you've already mentioned, because I think that's where you're going for your second pick, isn't it? Yeah,
so it was close, and my top 3 was very close, to be fair. I think, as we've all suggested, this has been a a tight top of the field. But it's George Russell who's number 2 for me, or number 3, I guess, in our ranking. I'll cop that. But I think I've been really impressed, and it's a step that started perhaps halfway through last season. It's been really solidified now that Mercedes has very much relied on him having a rookie in the other side of the garage. He's just so dependable now in a way that even about a year ago, I don't think he was. Like, we think back to Canada, maybe that's closer to 18 months ago now. Last year, that was a victory that had gone begging for Mercedes at the time, but through him and Lando Norris did the same at the time, sort of fumbled the chance, and Max Verstappen was able to come through for a victory at that time. This year, Canada, I thought, was the perfect reply to that, in which he was absolutely flawless. And it's not only in Canada, but there's almost no race other than, well, you can't even say Monaco, because a technical problem in qualifying that deprived him there. Can't really think of any major error he's made this year in which Mercedes has allowed points to slip past. In one race, maybe in Miami, where he wasn't quite on Antonelli's level, strangely enough, the only time this year that hasn't really happened. Other than that, a car that's been so hot and cold this year, as much probably as almost any Mercedes car in the last few years, despite the positive start to the season they've had, has just been so rock solid in a way that I think establishes him in that upper tier in a way we knew he had the potential to be, but I think has only really in the last 12 months really proved. So he was my number 2, but he is our number 3.
I've got to say, Michael, I've got a few notes to add to that. My George Russell category on my list here just says a man who has very few bad days. And it just feels that he is just almost the most dependable, if you're not driving a McLaren, the most dependable guy on the grid for knowing where he's going to be. The gap between his best days and his worst days is pretty narrow, and that's not something you can say for a lot of people on this list.
And only 15 points behind Verstappen on the championship at this point, which I think is also indicative. In a car that, well, I don't know, Alex, I'd be interested in your take, but I guess on average, a car that's not been as good as the Red Bull, it's had some better days than the Red Bull. But I think that's quietly impressive, his closeness to Verstappen on the title table.
Yeah, it is impressive. And I think we've got to add into the fact that he's had the contract hanging over his head all season long as well. And honestly, seeing it on the ground, it was beginning to affect him at some races. So the fact that he's kept that consistency in performance, he's got to stop going for these dry tire gambles. He's got to. I was like, not this again. Honestly, like you see Charles and George in for the slicks earlier, and you're like, not this again, guys. This doesn't come on. So it's a 52 lap race. There's no need for this. But yeah, apart from that and Monaco, which just the nature of qualifying did for him. Then no, to get that win, pole position and win, and just keep the rest of the field on the end of the jab in Canada was very, very impressive. Stealing front rows when he's got no right to as well. Very, very similar in that regard to Verstappen. And with a Mercedes team that haven't been certain of the design direction of the car, which has been a facet of the last couple of seasons as well. So deserved placing for George Russell and his best season so far, I think, in F1.
Yes, I think that's a solid top 3, if nothing else. But Alex, we're back to you if you want to take us away with number 4 for the second round of picks.
Yeah, I feel a bit harsh putting this guy in at number 4. But Lando Norris, driver who's won 4 Grand Prix so far this year, the pre-season title favourite, according to the bookies. And the reason that I have him lower down is just purely because I expected him to have the season that Oscar Piastri has had. It's as simple as that. He knew coming into this year what the car was going to be capable of. I think by the time that they realistically got to Bahrain and saw the state that Red Bull were in, that he would have known that he had a brilliant opportunity. And essentially, I expected him to get the start that Oscar got. Since then, he's had to go through a tough moment. I think Saudi was a very, very tough moment where, and this is, not an easy thing to say, but it did appear that the pressure was slightly getting to him in that moment. He's come through really nicely, obviously had the contact in Canada, but in the most recent phase of the season, looking like the Lando that I think many expected to start the campaign, and some really, really close battles. Austria could have easily slipped through his fingers. Hungary could have easily slipped through his fingers. So a much better second stint of the first half of the season. But yeah, he's opening races are the reason why I've got him lower down.
Yeah, I reckon that's fair, Alex. Michael, he was, for context, he was third on my list. He was ahead of Russell. Not by a lot, but he was third on my list ahead of Russell. And I was particularly impressed with the response after Canada, because that felt like, this could be one of those tentpole moments of a season we look back at, and this is when things started to unravel a little bit. He's won 3 of the last 4 since then. Okay, Silverstone was a gift with the penalty, and Hungary, he played the strategy card of someone who had nothing to lose because he had already lost that race until he won it. So there is context to 2 of those 3 wins in that span, but the bounce back from Canada was something that, I wouldn't say that I had trust issues, but I didn't necessarily see that coming based on what we've seen from him in the past. It felt like it was something that might linger for a little bit. So that's been really impressive, but I think Alex summed it up really well. He's had a perfectly acceptable season in a very good car, but the season you expected him to have was perhaps the more rock-solid season that Piastri has had, and it's for that reason that he falls on the list for me. But it sounds like you might have him a little bit higher. Actually, sorry, a little bit lower than me.
No, fourth was, a little bit lower than you, but fourth was where I had him, because it's hard to put the guy who's only 9 points behind the championship leader much lower than fourth, but I think we've identified some exceptional circumstances in the guys that are ahead of him. I think for me, the differentiation is, and I say this to mean no disservice to what he has shown us so far, but the points margin could even really go either way. I mean, at 9 points, of course, that's the case. But for me, in the circumstances in which you go back through the races and calculate how Norris could have ended up ahead at this point, a lot of it is more to do with mistakes on his part. Or if you go back and find a way for Oscar to be further ahead, which could happen, as we alluded to earlier, it seems more like it's bad luck that's held him back a little bit. And again, I say that not to say, Norris should have been blown away or he's been driving terribly, because, as you said, Matt, in the last month or so, a lot of those mistakes that cost him dearly have largely been eyed out so far. We'll wait and see if that's the case after the break as well. But for me, it feels like if the gap was going to be bigger, it would largely be because Oscar got a little bit better a rub of the green, whether we're talking about Hungary, and again, take nothing away from the great Norris drive he put in there after that first lap, or of course, a British Grand Prix. Okay, we can talk about whether or not a penalty falls into the luck category. But it's very close. This is a very close top 4. Only 2 of them can win the title. So I guess if he wins it, he'll probably have to go to number 1. The big jump by the end of the year when we redo the rankings. But it's interesting to consider that he's down in 4th, considering how close this is. And like you said, Alex, how much he was expected to be the title leader by this point.
Yeah, I think it's an expectation thing that Lando's putting together his first full championship campaign, right? He had a tilt last year, but no one expected Verstappen to see. It would have been the largest ever points collapse in the history of the World Championship if Verstappen had lost the title. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen with a driver of Verstappen's caliber and a team that were used to winning titles year in, year out, had the expertise, and they still had a lot of their big hitters in place at that point. Race management from Jonathan Wheatley on a race by race basis, as we've seen with Sauber, worth an awful lot. So that was never going to happen. So this is his first full campaign, and the one caveat I would say is, if you finish strong and you have all the momentum at the end of the year, you'd rather have it that way round than get the strong start. But I did expect him to get the start that Oscar got, and I think that's why he's slightly lower on all of our lists.
Well, largely cordial, but I guess it's 2-1 to keep him in 4th, so he is 4th. Matt, tell me about your number 5.
I reckon we've spent a lot of time talking about Oscar Piastri and other drivers ahead on this list. I don't think there's a lot of things that need to be said about this driver, because he's 5th on my list. He's probably 5th on yours. Alex, he's also probably 5th on yours. He's in a category of 1 for me at Charles Leclerc. I don't think he could be considered for my top 4, but he feels to me like he's a good way ahead of all the rest of them, and particularly his teammate. Will be interesting to see where he comes up. It kind of feels that he's just a nailed-in 5th. This is life for Charles Leclerc in 2025. It's had its high points. It's not been as high as he would quite like. He has his teammate covered. He's not really going to be challenging the top 4. There's nothing behind him he particularly needs to worry about. Charles Leclerc, 5th place. If I won't fight you if you disagree with me, but I'll be very perplexed.
No, he was 5th for me as well. Alex, I think I saw a nod there. It does feel like he's a very 5th driver this year.
Oof.
Yeah. I think he's done well to get the number of podiums that he's got. I think he's done well to steal a few of those. Spa was one lockup and Max Verstappen was by, for example. 3rd place in Spain was good tactics, good team tactics, all the way back to Saturday as well. He's obviously devastated to miss out on pole position in Monaco because he wasn't that far away and he knows what it would have meant. Monaco and Budapest are two big opportunities for him to win a Grand Prix, but no, Ferrari, wrong design direction. It's left him in a lonely, lots of lonely races and a lonely part of this table, but I had him 5th as well.
I want to ask you, Alex, because one of the great, I think, genuine, and I say this not just because you're a guest and I can tell you to your face, but it's a great moment of commentary. last year's Monaco Grand Prix of Charles Leclerc winning. And I think even greater in retrospect, because that's the only time he's converted from pole in the last 16 races, which is a very grim statistic for Charles Leclerc, 16 being his number as well, something maybe I don't know what that's going to mean going forward. But it strikes me, and this is a bit more of a long forward-looking question, but he's had a lot of, obviously, great moments with Ferrari, but the list of disappointments grows. Do you see, and we all hope Ferrari gets back to a competitive picture next year, because it is good for the sport when Ferrari is winning. It doesn't have to dominate, but it needs to be in contention, where that rubber band of relationship between him and Ferrari is at risk of breaking, considering we're now entering the years we would consider a driver's most productive?
I just don't think so. I mean, obviously, there's going to have to be a point where, if a resurgent Aston Martin came calling with a really strong Honda power unit and Adrian Newey firing on all cylinders, something like that would be pretty tricky, wouldn't it? Be pretty tricky for him to go, well, what's the evidence that I can win here? But he has such an emotional bond with that team. He's been with them for a long time. I get the sense that if you offered him 3 titles in one team and 1 title at Ferrari, that he'd probably more desperate to succeed with Ferrari purely because of the amount of time and years he's put into it. But one of the reasons that the commentary went the way it did in 2024 is that you just never know when drivers are going to get these chances. If you go back to Fernando Alonso, you would have said, "Oh, of course he'll win more than 2 titles." And so that historic journey to be a Monaco Grand Prix winner in Monaco. Also, one of the main reasons for doing that as well is we have so many new viewers, right? We have so many people who have discovered the sport in the last couple of years. On Channel 4, we have a lot of people who maybe don't watch every single week and dip into it for the feature race highlights. I just didn't want anyone to think, oh, spoiled rich kid from Monaco, why do I care? So the reason for that was like, here's why you should care, because it's an extraordinary story. But in terms of the Ferrari relationship, I think it will endure for a long time. But they're on their, in the history of the World Championship, they're on their longest winless streak now, and they've got one of the all-time great driver pairings. So the timing of it is not ideal. But no, I don't think the rubber band's going to snap. Aston Martin could test that in a few years' time.
I think what you just said there, Alex, is really interesting, because if he gets beaten to race wins in a World Championship by teams that have been in the mix or ahead of him for most of the time he's been at Ferrari, that is one thing. If someone comes from behind and pinches one while he still is where he is, that is going to be twisting the knife to a level that you would not believe. And I just think that you talk about that history now becomes unprecedented. It's all the more reason for him to want to stick around to be the guy to rewrite that, I think. I think if anything, it almost strengthens the bond. It's just the way he is as a personality. It's like, no, I am going to be the person that gets this done. Now, whether that's a futile exercise, we don't know. But it'd be an even more magical story if he had suffered through all of the lean times, if he is the guy that actually breaks the drought. And how would he feel if Lewis Hamilton won a title for Ferrari after he'd been there for 5 minutes? That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
That would be interesting. But as perhaps we'll learn as we get further down the ranking. Well, we'll think about how likely that is. Sad times for Charles Leclerc, although at least he'll have the record for some time for longest graphic radio message in the history of Formula 1. For which there is a terrific Star Wars meme. I encourage you to go and search it out if you have not seen it.
That.
Meme of the year. Enjoyable. Our ranking of memes, that's number 1 so far, isn't it?
Well, we didn't do that podcast because it's too easy. So we just knew that would be easily number 1. Time to come to my turn, pick number 6, and I'm very excited to go off this part of the ranking because I think this is actually where it gets hard. You might be
very hard
surprised how straightforward the top 5 were. Even we had very minor disagreements, but from number 6 downwards, I think it is more difficult. So I'm going to start Well, for me, it was a difficult pick, but I think it just feels right to have Alex Albon at number 6. He has had some up and down patches, I guess, in the latter part of this first half of the season, but continues to be the guy, for the last 4 years, or 3.5 years, you have to ask the question, where would Williams be if it did not have Alex Albon in the lineup? And the question is probably a lot lower down the Constructors' Championship. Regularly scoring points. He's got his best Williams finish of his Williams career this year, and he's got it 3 times for 5th place. Considering where Williams has been in recent years, that is more impressive than it might sound to some people. And continues just to be very consistent to doing all the things we've got used to seeing him do, pull off unusual strategies, great qualifying performances when the car comes to him. And to be fair to that dip in performance he may have had, let's say a couple of months ago or a month or so ago, that was when the Williams car was finding itself less and less competitive to a midfield that was improving more than it was. But more recently, that one upgrade the team originally said wasn't coming, but did end up coming, has returned again to being the sort of leader of the midfield, except in Hungary where the car did not perform. So for me, it felt pretty solidly number 6, but I don't know. I'm guessing there's some mixed reactions there.
Well, I had him at number 6, so
very good.
I'm happy to agree. Yeah, I had him at number 6. I think he knew at the start of the year this was going to be a paddock perception type of season for him. Got a race winner, proven race winner, coming into the team as well. This was the moment to say, I belong in that category. I'm as good, if not better, as Carlos Sainz. I'm going to prove it, and you're all going to see that, and you're all going to jump to the conclusion that I could be a race winner in Formula One if given the right machinery. Started with that intention. Blew Carlos away in the start of the qualifying head-to-head. Carlos caught him up again. Then he's disappeared. He's had an outstanding season. Yeah, 8th in the World Championship. Obviously got a little bit lost when the car was unreliable. But the non-score in Bahrain was because of a weird quirk with qualifying. He's knocked out in Q1 and he shouldn't have been. So outstanding season for him. And he knew that the paddock was going to form an opinion when he was teammates with Carlos Sainz. And we get to the mid-season break, and the opinion is, Alex Albon, as we suspected, the real deal. And if you gave him a race-winning car, he'd be very comfortably in the mix.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Michael P6 on my list as well.
I did led with your reaction.
I did. I was just trying to confuse the video watchers here, no, he was P6 on my list. Endorse everything you guys said, Michael. To circle back to something that you said, where would Williams be without Alex Albon? I'll reframe that. Where might Red Bull Racing be if they'd had Alex Albon? Because, they did have him, wouldn't they? And wouldn't he be a great second driver alongside Max Verstappen right now? But probably no more needs to be said about that.
Well, Williams just full of drivers who'd be great in the Red Bull Racing car, wouldn't he?
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. Well,
I think they did inquire. I think they recently inquired about Alex Albon within the last couple of years. I think they tried to get him back. So that is thinking that Red Bull themselves have had, is my understanding.
Yes. I mean, if we were to write down all the thoughts that Red Bull Racing has had over the last 12 to 18 months, it'd make for a messy and confusing list.
Longer podcast than the best memes of 2025 podcast, but yes.
Well, an agreeable number 6 then. But Alex, why don't you take us to your number 7?
Number 7 is Isaac Hadjar for me.
Okay, interesting.
He had a nightmare in Melbourne. And the one thing I knew about Isaac Hadjar is that he was rapid. I didn't know if he had the mental strength to bounce back from tough moments in Formula One. So when you start with, let's be honest, an embarrassing moment to introduce yourself to the world when you're in the wall on the formation lap, I was a little bit worried for him. Up against Yuki Tsunoda as a teammate, how's this guy going to do? As it turns out, wasn't going to have Yuki Tsunoda for a teammate very long and was going to bounce back immediately. I think the reason I've got him so high is his core speed at certain points of the season has just been outstanding. There are so many times across a session where you're like, that is a ridiculously good lap. And you don't know if that's ever going to translate from Formula 2 to Formula 1. And I've just been mighty, mighty impressed with his ability to improve the racecraft all the way through, to work with the team. But I just think he's rapid, and he looks rapid in Formula 1 as well. I'm just so pleased to see him score so many points. He's obviously had a slightly tougher run in recent races, but the way that he bounced back and showed his talent after Melbourne, I think he's been absolutely outstanding. And he's actually paid back Red Bull. You know, Red Bull take pelters for a variety of different reasons. But he had a very ordinary first season in Formula 2. They could have cut him from the program. They could have said nope, but they believed in him. Second year, he contends for the title. And I think he looks a very worthy occupant of a car on the grid. And that's why I put him so high.
Where did you have him, Michael?
I had him only one place lower in 8th, but for all the same reasons, pretty much. I really like that, he's 13th in the championship. The Racing Bulls car's on average been the 6th fastest car in qualifying. His average qualifying position is 8th best in the field, better than any driver that's not in a front-running car and better than some drivers in front-running cars. That's really impressive. Like you say, Alex, the raw speed is clearly there. And for a lot of this season, his races have also been really good. There have been rookie mistakes and he has lost his way a little bit like a rookie is inclined to do, particularly in the way the midfield has moved this year, but has been much more solid than you would ever have guessed, judging by the kind of reluctance Red Bull Racing kind of was to promote him, or just because of the way that whole driver program is set up or has been mired in a mess for the last 18 months. And then, of course, that crash in the first round, you'd be tempted to think that this was going nowhere. But it's not only the bounce back, but just the level he's consistently been at, to the point where it's easy to forget that even happened in Australia.
Yeah, it is. I've got to say, after listening to you two, I feel slightly bad now about my list because I had him 10th. I feel a bit.
Oh, there we go.
I feel like I want to hide under the table after saying that, and not because I particularly don't rate what he's done. I think he's been really, really good, and to my mind, I think I probably had the lowest expectations for him out of all of the rookies. So he's the one to me that's exceeded my preseason expectations of all of the new guys coming in by the greatest margin. And that probably deserved higher than 10th on my list. And I feel bad about it. It's nothing personal, but he's been excellent. The mental resilience. I mean, Australia was, as you said, Alex, was absolutely crushing. I mean, of all the things to do in your first Grand Prix, we haven't seen, I can't even remember the last time we saw someone do that on their debut, and the public humiliation that was. But he's just been genuinely very, very good. And something you just said then before, Michael, perhaps we should have seen this coming. The fact that the Red Bull Racing pipeline seemed wholly uninterested in giving him a promotion may have been the absolute endorsement of how good he was going to be, given what happens to everybody they do rate. But there you go.
Well, I'll be glad to know he didn't take any of that personally, at a minimum, dropping him to 10th. But in that case, I'm very interested because you're the next pick. Who is next on your list?
We're going from one end of the age and experience spectrum to the other. I've got Fernando Alonso 7th for me. To me, he gets this season half-season award for doing the most with the least. And you look at the way his season has gone, no points in the first 8 rounds, 26 points in the past 6 rounds. And so it's not 2023 Redux all over again where he's making podiums and you simultaneously have all the old heads in Formula One like me going, see, told you this Alonso guy was good. And then all the Netflix newbies going, that old bloke's pretty quick, isn't he? That Alonso guy, he looks all right. You're not getting that quite, that 2023 opening anymore. But in terms of what he's had to work with and how he's had to work with it, 14-0 against his teammate in qualify, which sort of goes without saying to some degree. But I think I don't think his level when he's fully motivated and on his good days has particularly dropped off. I do get the sense there are a couple of days in a season where things are looking a little hopeless and perhaps the effort level and commitment to the cause might not be peak Alonso, but that's only because peak Alonso is a completely different animal. And we talked about this on our last podcast. I love seeing him in a race where there's a sniff of doing something slightly mischievous.
Yeah.
I loved what he did in Budapest, where you just looked at the timing tower in the first 15 laps and you thought, I know exactly what you're doing here. And the best thing is every other person in the field knew exactly what he was doing as well, setting himself up to finish 5th in that Grand Prix and executed it absolutely flawlessly. Mischievous Alonso is still one of my favourite Alonsos, so that's why he is 7th on my list.
Oh, it's the peak Alonso, isn't it? Mischievous
isn't
Alonso?
It? It's the best one.
I'm interested in.
Dastardly Alonso. Love it.
Even if some fans must surely wonder why Sonny Hayes has a Spanish accent, it is still good to have him in the mix. I want to push this along now, though. First of all, does that sound about right to you, Alex? Should ask you, of course. We're consultative on this list to have Fernando Alonso around here.
He's 44. He's 44.
and he's still contending at the front in Formula One. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. The fact he still wants to keep coming back, the fact that he gives us moments of, he's provisionally on the front row at the weekend. He's still providing magical moments. He's still a wonderful part of the grid and delivering top fives at 44 years of age. Absolutely ridiculous. And to be honest, there's no precedent for that in the modern history of Formula One. And even when you go back to the era, brilliant names who were competing at this age include Graham Hill and Jack Brabham in cars that were much slower, much less strenuous, required less fitness. He's essentially rewriting what's possible for a driver in their 40s in Formula One, and just give him a car where he can compete at the front, and we'll see more magic. But the only disappointment for me for the last weekend was that he didn't take provisional pole. Because Jolyon Palmer alongside me in commentary would be saying that Aston always fade away from practice. And at the start of the session to wind him up, I'd highlighted Alonso hadn't taken pole since Hockenheim 2012. And the fact he nearly took provisional pole would be one of my favourite ever commentary box moments with Palmer. So close to winding him up. But no, he's deservedly in that ranking.
I like it. You don't know when it's going to happen. Next year, we all hope he might get his hands on a more competitive car. All right, the pick comes back to me for number 9. And I'm going to go with, despite the fact we already picked Isaac Hadjar, I think a very close contender for Rookie of the Year. I think this is a really interesting battle that's emerged, one that I didn't see coming at the start of the year. It's Gabriel Bortoleto. Yes, in the points, he's behind Nico Hülkenberg, but of course Nico had that great podium in Silverstone. It's taken Bortoleto a little while to warm up to it, but then again, so has the car taken a little while to warm up to being in Formula One. But it's the fact that it's 5-all in the race head-to-head, that he's ahead in the qualifying head-to-head 8.6, that he's ahead on the average fastest lap in qualifying by half a tenth, 0.06 600ths, however you calculate that number precisely. This is a rookie who shouldn't be out qualifying so regularly, even if the margin is smaller, driver with so much more experience in a car that isn't great, that doesn't look like it is the most straightforward car to drive that was until about 2 months ago the slowest car in Formula One, but he's done so well to build up to this moment. It's been really impressive. It's been sort of a solid and steady build-up. It hasn't been overreach. He's built into it. We shouldn't forget he's the Formula 2 champion as well. I feel like sometimes we discount that status a little bit in Formula 1 for whatever reason. And he did it in a great way, of course, having won Formula 3 before that. So maybe we shouldn't have been so impressed, but I've been really impressed with his first season. So he's number 9 on my list.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. I'll tell you one thing for the Formula 2 Championship last year. A lot of people were saying, the new car. The new car has changed things. It's given us a bit of a random order. Well, given Bortoleto's season, it doesn't look so random anymore, does it? He had a title race with Isaac Hadjar. I was worried at the start of the year he just wasn't going to have a car to show his talent. The titles, so he blew the field away in Formula 3. Formula 2 was a really close battle, really open season, and then it became a head-to-head with Hadjar, and he just was so good, racecraft-wise, he was so good. It's his speed in qualifying this year up against Hülkenberg that I've just been like, I just did not see that coming in year one, and I think he has surprised the team and Formula One and deserves his place in the top 10.
Yeah, Michael, he was 10th on my list. The thing I'll add to what you guys have said about him that I've really liked, he's risen with the tide. I think that's a really, really strong sign as a rookie is. As the car has got better, as it's become more competitive, as it's become more capable of better results, he's risen with that for a guy who's done 14 Grand Prix starts. I think that's super, super impressive. Given the pedigree, perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised, but given where that car started at the beginning of the season, I mean, it looked like it was going to be a pretty long, fraught season for him. So the fact that he's managed to get in our top 10, 14 rounds in is a testament to how good this guy's going to be, not just how good he is.
Yeah, I think well summed up. Well, that brings us to number 10. There are race winners we haven't mentioned, world champions we have not mentioned on this list.
Yes.
Alex, you get to round us out. Who is your 10th pick for so far in 2025?
I was really hoping you weren't going to make me pick again because we've got to leave some heavy hitters out.
We are good hosts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that politeness. That hasn't put me in a horrible position at all. I'd only written down to number 9 because I didn't think I was going to have to pick up. So I'm currently looking at the list in front of me. I mean, Lewis Hamilton's won a sprint race this year, so it feels pretty ridiculous to not have him in the top 10. But then obviously obvious struggles. He's actually been quite close. I think I'm going to go for Hulk. I think I'm going to go for Nico Hülkenberg. Just purely because if you make 10 places up 4 times in a Grand Prix season, you are having the racecraft of your life, that podium moment. There are 2 moments this season where I was like, that just looks absolutely impossible. I feel like I'm looking at F1 25, the video game. Hulkenberg getting P3 at Silverstone, and someone not being Christian Horner being the CEO and team principal on the main racing. Just like, what are we looking at? And yeah, I think I'm probably going to go for Hulkenberg, in that it would have been very easy for Hulkenberg to have scored very few points this year because of the qualifying. He can't get a tune out of the car, right? He just cannot get it to work over one lap. The fact that he's got multiple points finishes and a podium for turning down every strategic shout that Sauber had for him. Do you want to pit now? No. Do you want to stay out? No, I think we'll box. Like, all the way through. His team radio for Silverstone's hilarious. So, yeah, he wins by a nose. I actually think Hamilton will have a much better the second half of the season and will turn things around with Ferrari. But, yeah, Hulkenberg for that podium for me.
2 Sauber drivers, Michael, inside the top 10. That's not something we've said for quite some time, is it? In any form, be it podcast or actual race form, but it's hard to argue. I think Alex's point about when he scores, when he has big days, they are big, capital BIG days. He really capitalises on the chances that he has to impress. There's not that many of them, but he certainly has made the most of them. And yeah, I agree with you. The 2 most random things we've seen all year is Nico Hülkenberg negotiating the steps for a podium, and who is that guy sitting on the Red Bull Racing pit wall calling himself the team principal. They are 2 of the stranger moments. There'll probably be more, but yeah, no argument from me. And Hamilton was in I was going to call it the honourable mentions list, but I actually found that it dropped off pretty quickly after top 10, to be honest. I found it very hard to make a real compelling case for anybody else, so I've got no issue with Hülkenberg at all. Did you have him in there, Michael?
I did. He was my number 10. 2 top 10 Sauber drivers, because I mean it's similar-ish argument to Alex Albon. If you from the points perspective, you take away his points, Sauber is not an outside chance to finish 5th in the Constructors' Championship this year, which is a sentence that I feel like I shouldn't be able to say, to put into words after the last few years or even the first couple of months of this season. So he's doing, and I like this lineup because they're both doing exactly what they're brought in to do, right? Bortoleto was there to show potential and deliver, and Hülkenberg was there to be the solid foundation to build up this team, and they're both doing it immediately as soon as the car's given them even half of something to work with. I really
think there's a lesson in there for Cadillac as well. I think there's a lesson in there for Cadillac. Get a young charger from Formula 2, all speed, all raw, they don't know what they don't know, and get someone with bags of experience. Because if you go for 2 very experienced drivers, you would never have expected Hülkenberg to be beaten in head-to-head qualifying at all. No one would have said that was possible at the start of the year. You've got Bortoleto, huge confidence, and I think there's a lesson there for Cadillac. But yeah, I just can't believe that Hamilton, if you'd said in China that he's won at his second weekend with Ferrari in Formula 1, and by the way, the rest of the campaign is going to see us and not include him, and he's going to be in the honourable mention section, like Pierre Gasly for getting that Alpine to Q3 7 times. That's crazy. That's one of the biggest surprises for a long time in Formula 1.
Well, crazy and surprising, but it doesn't feel like a stretch to say that. It feels completely justifiable from where I'm sitting. I think you'd have to mount be an interesting argument to try and squeeze him in there. I mean, and you would feel that you are shoehorning him in there because he is Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion driving for Ferrari, but it has been underwhelming in the extreme.
Yeah, not the first season with Ferrari, certainly he or Ferrari envisaged. And, well, I think hopefully, I mean, I just don't want it to peter out. That's what I hope for next year. I want a decisive outcome one way or another. We don't have to say, oh, if only this or that. But we'll see. I hope he can at least bounce back next year. Or, as you say, Alex, in the second half of the year. Well, that's our top 10. I've got to say, Much less argument than I had personally hoped for, but that's okay. I mean, great minds think alike. That's a shame for you, Alex, to be in this conversation with Matt and I. But appreciate your time all the same. I hope the second half of the season is unpredictable and enjoyable as the first part. And thanks so much for joining us.
Great to join you guys. Cheers for having me.
That was Alex Jacques, the F1 TV World Feed commentator. You can hear him as well if you've got a Foxtel set-top box with a Foxtel Sports subscription as well. Just get your F1 TV Pro app up and ready for, well, the next race in a couple of weeks' time, the Dutch Grand Prix. But Alex is gone. We did the top 10. It was fun chatting to him, deciding that. But let's round out the complete list, you and me, because there are a lot of drivers who can get a reference. Lance Stroll did. We know where your list.
Yes.
But why don't we go through very quickly, the rest of the list to complete the field?
Okay, I'm going to divide the last 11 drivers in this list are in 3 categories for me.
Yes.
So 11 through 13 is some order of Pierre Gasly, Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Antonelli. For me, and look, I know Antonelli's run into the mid-season break was grim. The first 5 or 6 rounds, he's pretty good. Yes. He's also had a podium, so I think there's a bit of recency bias, perhaps, with shoving him too far down this list. I think on balance, he's had a perfectly acceptable season for a rookie. Yes. He's in a very good car, obviously, but I still think there's some high points in there. And then from there on, you've got this sort of Ocon, Lawson, Lance Stroll, Carlos Sainz, who's been pretty underwhelming for Williams. And the whole Oliver Bearman question is that they're sort of in a lump between like 14 to 18 for me. I've seen Bearman ranked quite high in a number of these lists, and there has been some speed, but man, there's been some mistakes and some really ropey things at a guy. I know he's young still, but there's been a huge gap between his best and his worst, and that's kind of why he's been a bit penalised for me. And then you've got the category of 3 at the back, which is all a bit sad. Yuki Tsunoda. And then the 2 Alpine rookies who had no chance to actually do anything because they were swapped out for each other. I had Jack Doohan slightly in front of Franco Colapinto, not just because I'm waving the Australian flag here, but I do think that Colapinto has been given more rope to do more with the Alpine and has probably done less with it.
Yes, I would agree with that. Just to start at the bottom, I suppose, I did have Jack Doohan ahead of Franco Colapinto at the bottom. Not at the bottom because I think they're necessarily the worst drivers in the field, but because, like you say, they haven't had the time to really do much. But in Jack Doohan's shorter time, I think he did at least as well as Colapinto has done. By virtue of that, I'm going to rake him above. But let me go back to the top, weirdly enough. Lewis Hamilton is 11 for me, not inside the top 10 probably for the first time I've ever done these rankings. I think that's understandable. It's the longest he's gone in a season without a podium so far. Had some good weekends. Obviously the sprint victory in China was important, but I think for reasons we've all talked about hasn't had a great season so far. Pierre Gasly, number 12, getting a lot out of a pretty ordinary car. I think that's fair to say. Has his weekends where he kind of disappears, but also has some really good weekends. Then I put Esteban Ocon, maybe controversially, judging by yours a little bit, but he's been, I think, quietly quite good at Haas. Not consistent enough to be a top 10 contender, but he's held up the team and he's scored almost all of the team's points and is keeping them off the bottom of the championship table.
There's a bit of Hulkenberg in there, and that when there's a big result to get, he'll go get it. Maybe not to the same extent as Hulkenberg, but similar.
I think so. I think he's been a reasonable like for like. I put him just ahead of Oliver Bearman. He could have gone a little bit lower, I think you're right. But he's shown really great speed, and he's finished 11th a lot. So I think in a pretty tight midfield, when on any given day there's maybe 3 places in the points available. I think that counts. Then Antonelli, he has had a good season for where he's at, but I think where he's at is the key point, which is the guy's arrived in Formula One with the absolute minimum required preparation.
Exactly.
And so I think that's there about. Then I've got Carlos Sainz, pretty anonymous, but I think also there's been a bit of bad luck in there. Liam Lawson, I think he's improving. I think if the mid-season come any later, I think he'd probably be a bit higher considering his trajectory. Then Lance Stroll, because he could have been a bit lower. Yuki Tsunoda, I struggle a little bit with him. You can't rank him higher because Max Verstappen's doing so much with that car. But we now know that no one can drive that second car, so it's a little bit of a what do you do? And he's ahead of only Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto.
The extraordinary part of that list is that if you had to pick before this podcast who was going to have Lance Stroll highest, you wouldn't have picked me.
No, I wouldn't have.
So there you go.
That's very exciting. That is very exciting. But let us know what you think about the top 10, top 20, in fact, or top 21 as it is. Or you can pick third drivers if you really want to. Social media channels, go to Fox Motorsport, or you can even comment on this podcast in some of your podcast apps, or YouTube, obviously, if you're watching this. But we can't wrap this up without the crystal ball by Complete Home Filtration. So we've got Supercars still going. We've got the mid-season break of MotoGP returning. Where are you going with your prediction?
I'm going MotoGP being back in action, and this is going to sound like the most obvious thing in the entire world. Marc Marquez is going to win the Austrian Grand Prix this Sunday.
Well, there you go.
Marc Marquez wins motorcycle race. Incredible news. This actually would be incredible news. It's the least successful circuit of his entire MotoGP career.
Oh,
He's never won here.
Really?
There are only 3 circuits where he has never won. Indonesia and Portimao are the other 2. But Indonesia, he's only done 2 races there. Portimao, he's only done 4. 8 starts at the Red Bull Ring, never won.
Remarkable. I feel like I can remember him.
Well, and this is why, because he finished second 3 years in a row on last lap battles with Ducatis against Andrea Dovizioso twice and Jorge Lorenzo once, and got his nose bloodied on all 3 of them when he was on a Repsol Honda. It's the only circuit on the calendar where he's never won. Now, the reason I mention this year he's broken 11-year victory droughts in Qatar and Mugello, and an 8-year victory drought in Assen. So it's not the fact that he's leading this World Championship by 120 points. He's winning at tracks that have been his kryptonite in the past. And given the way this season has gone for him, if anyone that's going to know that stat, he will know that stat because he knows he's been beaten there by Ducati. So to go back on a Ducati and perhaps correct that one, that'll just be another box for him to tick as he heads on to this World Championship.
Very exciting. That's great. I can't believe that. Like, really, it's funny what the
There you
mind
go.
does, doesn't it? Just
Crystal ball's in good order this weekend.
It is in good order.
What have you got for me?
Good pick. So we were all braced in the world of Formula One for Cadillac to announce its first driver signing before the mid-season break. Now, it needed to do this because obviously its first test, which is the end of January next year, is quite close now. It's only a few months away, really, which is alarming for its own reasons. And it needs someone to start developing the car. It needs an experienced driver, and it hasn't signed one yet.
However,
it's not something I believe that they would be keeping quiet. But my prediction, and I'm doing this with my fingers crossed, I hope I'm wrong. It's not the first time I've been wrong, crystal ball, that they're going to announce the driver during the worst possible time, which is the shutdown period, when no one will be at the news desk to cover it. Obviously, there will be at Fox Sports because big organisation. But, in general, that's not when you announce things. But I believe this new American team is going to make its first significant Formula One faux pas and announce Valtteri Bottas will be driving for it in the next week or so.
At 4:59 p.m. European time on a Friday.
Yeah, exactly. On next Friday, I think is what's going to happen. But they do need a driver. It's some talking point that perhaps we'll be talking about the next week or two, particularly if they haven't announced it.
Yes.
That they need someone to drive one of its cars at least, and then they'll need another driver after that. Some interesting theories about why that hasn't happened. We know that Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez are at the top of the list. I've heard maybe Perez doesn't want to be the driver that's announced second if they don't know whether they want a second experienced or a young driver. Don't know. Anyway, we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. Presumably. Maybe we won't, considering we don't know yet. But that's all the time we have for Pit Talk today. You can subscribe to Pit Talk wherever you get your favourite podcasts, and you can leave us a rating and a review as well, and you can watch episodes like this on YouTube too. Formula One is still on a break, but this weekend it is the Austrian Motorcycle Grand Prix with lights out at 10 p.m. on Sunday. You can keep up to date with the latest F1, MotoGP and Supercars news at foxsports.com.au. Until next week, depending on what podcast you're listening to, I think this podcast, in fact, will take a mid-season 1 week off. The week after that, I've been Michael. Thanks very much for your company, and we'll catch you next week.